Look at the right hand, slick with fresh blood. It holds a surgeon's scalpel as casually as a schoolmaster holds a pen. You are standing in an operating theater, surrounded by the imagined smell of copper and carbolic acid. By the estimation of many modern critics, this is the greatest painting of the 19th century produced in the United States. The New York Times art critic Michael Kimmelman called it, hands down, the finest 19th century American painting. Yet, when it was unveiled, the nation that inspired it was appalled. They banished it to a military hospital exhibit, deemed it unfit for polite society, and turned their backs on the artist. Why would America reject its own greatest painting? What is it about this canvas that made a society avert its eyes? You are plunged into the claustrophobic amphitheater of Jefferson Medical College in Philadelphia in 1875. And the first thing you should know is the sheer scale of what Eakins made. This canvas stands 8 feet tall and 6.5 feet wide. It does not hang quietly on a wall. It commands a room. It pulls you in and surrounds you the way the theater itself would have surrounded its students. In the center stands Professor Samuel D. Gross, 70 years old, one of the most eminent surgeons in the country, and a figure so commanding that his colleagues had taken to calling him the Emperor of American Surgery. His uncompromising gaze pierces through the canvas. He has paused mid-operation, as supervising the dangerous removal of dead bone from a patient's infected thigh, a condition known as osteomyelitis of the femur. Look at the patient. He is believed to have been a teenage boy, though the exposed figure is barely discernible. You see only a thigh, a calf, a sock-clad foot. Stripped, anesthetized, and laid bare in front of a room full of men taking notes, his vulnerability is total. One of the surgical assistants is holding a cloth over the patient's face, administering the anesthetic. A reminder that surgery under general anesthesia was still a relatively new development in 1875, and its inclusion here is deliberate. Eakins is painting a portrait of medicine at a specific turbulent moment in its history. Below Gross, a team of doctors probes the open wound. You are witnessing a visceral mess of torn flesh, metal retractors, and deep crimson blood. Look also at the figure visible over Gross's right shoulder on the left side of the painting. That is the clinic clerk, Dr. Franklin West, taking notes on the procedure. His pencil mirrors Gross's scalpel, the work of documentation running alongside the work of surgery, both essential to the project of modern medicine. But there is something else in this painting that audiences in 1875 could not have fully processed. Look at those surgeons. They are operating in their everyday black frock coats, without gloves, without masks, without washing their hands. Gross himself was one of the loudest voices dismissing germ theory as quackery. He opposed listerism until the day he died. What Eakins has documented here is not just surgery. It is a portrait of a brilliantly dangerous man, operating at the edge of what medicine was willing to accept. In 1876, the United States hosted the Philadelphia Centennial Exposition to show the globe its cultural and intellectual arrival. Thomas Eakins had a specific ambition. He wanted to celebrate Philadelphia's medical excellence, to show the world that this city's surgeons were the finest on earth, and, not incidentally, to announce his own arrival as a painter of consequence. He was 31 years old. He submitted the Gross Clinic as the centerpiece of that vision, expecting it to hang in the crown of the Fine Art Gallery. However, the selection committee for the Fine Arts Gallery rejected the painting outright. They gave no official explanation on record, only a vague gesture toward the painting's unsuitability for a public cultural showcase designed to project American refinement to the world. Controversy about the painting was mainly centered on its violence and on the melodramatic presence of the woman. So eventually, it was banished to Ward 1 of the U.S. Army Post Hospital exhibit, displaying it amid medical equipment as a surgical document rather than a work of art. This rejection highlighted a collision between the idealized nation society wanted to celebrate and the bleeding reality Eakins presented. But what exactly was America so afraid of? To understand the scandal, consider what came before it. For centuries, art depicted medicine with polite, distant reverence. In Rembrandt's The Anatomy Lesson of Dr. Nicolaes Tulp, the grim subject matter is handled delicately. The corpse, a criminal executed for armed robbery, is pale and clean like carved marble, lacking blood or suffering. Crucially, it is also a corpse. Death safely in the past. There is no patient. There is no risk. There is no one who might die while you watch. Eakins took the opposite approach. He painted wet blood on hands, an open wound, and a living, breathing patient enduring the knife. The suffering is happening now, in front of you. Scholars still debate whether Eakins misjudged the public's tolerance for reality or intentionally forced a confrontation. Look at the left middle ground of the canvas at the lone woman, widely believed to be the patient's mother. She is recoiling, hands clamped over her face, fingers clawing at her skin. She is the only person in the room who cannot bear to look. While Rembrandt portrayed medicine as a calm intellectual exercise over a body that could no longer feel pain, Eakins presented it as a bloody battle for a life that was very much still in the balance. That is where this painting became dangerous. Looking closer, the canvas reveals its secrets. A crowd of figures is crammed into the wooden tiers of the lecture theatre. The woman covering her eyes functions as a symbol of Victorian society, a society terrified of its own mortality and refusing to face uncomfortable physical truths. She is doing exactly what the 1876 Fine Arts Selection Committee did, hiding her face from reality. Scanning the edge of the composition, on the right-hand side of the canvas next to the tunnel railing sits a man intently sketching the procedure. That is Thomas Eakins himself. He studied anatomy at this college, dissecting cadavers alongside these men. By inserting himself at the edge of the scene, he makes his role explicit. He is the painter as surgeon, cutting through polite pretense to show you what is real. Notice the light. Eakins used theatrical illumination to isolate Dr. Gross's forehead, while the rest of the room falls into gloom. This deliberate echo of Renaissance altarpieces replaces the light of heaven with the cold light of the operating theatre. To dismiss this work as a medical illustration misunderstands Eakins's ambition. Art historian Elizabeth Johns argues the painting is about heroic medicine. In 1875, America typically depicted heroes as military generals on the horseback or stoic statesmen. Eakins rewrites that cultural script, presenting a modern hero who wields a scalpel instead of a sword, with the operating theatre as his battlefield. There is even a biographical dimension to this. Gross was performing a conservative procedure here. He was saving this boy's leg rather than amputating it, defying the prevailing surgical wisdom of the time that amputation was the safer route. Gross believed his colleagues amputated too quickly, too cowardly. He was fighting a battle on two fronts, against disease and against the timidity of his own profession. Eakins presents an argument that medicine is the new religion. The operating theatre has become the church, and science, rather than prayer, saves the living from death. For an 1876 audience, Eakins's painting was a nearly blasphemous claim. It said, "Here is your new God, and he has blood on his hands." Polite society punished him for it. 2 years after the Centennial Exposition in 1878, the Gross Clinic was purchased for $200, an exceptionally low sum for a work of this scale and ambition. For over 125 years, it hung in the halls of Jefferson Medical College, a quiet pilgrimage site known to those who knew where to look, but far outside the circuit of major museums. Then, in 2006, everything changed. The Thomas Jefferson University Board voted, in what many described as a secretive act, to sell the painting for $68 million. Not to a museum in Philadelphia, but to the National Gallery of Art in Washington and the brand new Crystal Bridges Museum in Bentonville, Arkansas, being built by Alice Walton, heir to the Walmart fortune. The city that had once rejected this painting was about to lose it entirely. Philadelphia revolted. A public campaign was launched with a tight December deadline. Ordinary citizens, schoolchildren, and philanthropists donated. Within weeks, $30 million had been pledged. Wachovia banks stepped in to bridge the remaining gap with a loan, but pledges alone were not enough. To finally complete the purchase, the Philadelphia Museum of Art and the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts were forced to sell off other Eakins works from their own collections, including the cello player, cowboy singing, and 2 oil sketches for cowboys in the Badlands, to cover what donations couldn't reach. The city sacrificed other treasures to save this one. Why did a city fight so fiercely for a painting its ancestors once banished? Because the culture had finally caught up. Over a century later, America realized Eakins was right. Eakins paid a heavy price for his devotion to the truth long before that vindication arrived. In 1886, he was forced out of the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, the institution where he had taught for years. 3 years after that dismissal, in 1889, he returned to the operating theater, this time commissioned by medical students at the University of Pennsylvania, who raised $750 among themselves to pay him to paint their retiring professor. The result was the Agnew Clinic. But look at the difference. The surgeons now wear white coats. The environment is cleaner, brighter. A professional nurse, Mary Clymer, stands in the operating theater, the first time such a figure had appeared in this kind of scene. The antiseptic revolution that Gross had spent his life denying has arrived. 14 years separate the two paintings. And in that gap, you can see the entire transformation of modern surgery. And perhaps there is a quiet vindication in the commission itself. The medical world was now turning to Eakins, the man they had once humiliated, as the definitive painter of their profession. His struggle holds up a mirror to us today. America rejected the Gross Clinic because it showed an uncomfortable truth. It forces us to ask, what are our polite fictions today? What realities do we filter out of our curated feeds and public discourse? Look again at the woman in the left middle ground. She represents a universal human instinct to look away from reminders of our fragility. What is the truth you are currently refusing to look at? It is a heavy question, but great art is meant to wake us up, not keep us comfortable. If you want to bring a piece of this story into your home, a museum-quality reproduction of the Gross Clinic is available at viewcrypt.com. Having this piece on your walls serves as a daily reminder to look the truth squarely in the eye. And it supports this channel so we can continue uncovering these stories together. See you in the next one.